Anna. How are you doing?
I am energized by this conference.
What we are seeing in India is some explosive growth in the m-commerce space. New age companies and startups are growing. And when HR heads of these companies look at engagement, they're seeing very high engagement scores. But at the same time, what you're also seeing is you're starting to see talent mortality happening. An observer of people and people systems, that doesn't go hand in hand, because you intuitively know that if an engaged workforce will stick around and thrive, what's happening here? What do you think is happening here?
I actually have a point of view that says, and this is a uniquely American colloquialism, but that we're barking up the wrong tree when all we focus on is engagement. Because just as you've said, there are organizations with very high engagement scores and very high turnover scores, right? So the common thinking that engagement equals retention doesn't play out. I think also when you step back and look and understand that engagement, there is no common definition that everybody around the world agrees on. So if you are a solutions provider that promises to measure and increase your engagement, you have a certain point of view. You probably have a model, and you push that sort of along, and then you measure according to that model and those characteristics. And so the Gallup model, the Q12, I have a best friend at work, is a very pervasive model, and lots of people use the Gallup data as sort of the default engagement data. But there are lots of other organizations around the world that are measuring engagement in the same kind of way, and their data is a little different. Since the year 2000, the world economy has spent something like $4 billion on measuring engagement, on increasing engagement, on training people to do a better job to get better engagement outcomes. And if you just look at the Gallup data over that period of time, the needle hasn't moved at all.
True.
We've spent billions of dollars. We've done amazing amounts of academic research, of vendor research. It's all we've talked about. It's all with our CEOs and our C-suite. It's all we read about in The Economist, in Fortune, it's been our entire focus on the relationship between employees and employers over the last 16 years, and we haven't been able to move the needle. So what I think is we're barking up the wrong tree. Engagement actually isn't the thing itself, but it's an outcome of a wide variety of things that we need to be doing around the culture in our organizations.
Fair. But I think you make a great point, right? Engagement is not about just the fun activities that you do, the offsites that you do. Those are possibly just symbols, but what we need to address are far more deeper things, and I'm keen to try and explore some of that through the conversations that.
Let me give you an example. So I was the CEO of the Great Place to Work Institute.
Right.
Does research, incredible research, into companies with really great cultures, really great cultures. And so they're headquartered in San Francisco. Silicon Valley is right there.
You bet.
And so companies like Genentech, like Intuit, there are a whole host of Silicon Valley companies that have been on the U.S. Great Place, of course, Google, years and years. If you are attracting talent in Silicon Valley, tech talent, you're competing against Google, Twitter,
LinkedIn.
Workday, all of these companies. And so what has happened over the years is trappings of culture look all the same. So if you're going after the same talent, you have to pay about the same.
Right.
The perks have to be about the same.
Similar, yes.
And so when you look at Facebook perks versus Google perks versus other big brand tech perks that we know, it's hard to distinguish. They're all the same.
True.
They'll do your laundry for you.
Exactly.
They'll feed you free 3 meals a day, regardless of what shift you work on.
You can bring your dogs to office.
You can wear flip-flops and shorts, all of that. But if you talk to the employees of companies that are on that list, and I have, like Google, like Intuit, like Genentech, and you say, so what do these perks really mean to you? Here's what they say. They say, the leaders of this organization are interested in me as a human being. They don't want me to spend all my time here. So they do my laundry, they get my car fixed, they get my car washed, they let me bring my dog to work so that when I come home, I can be all about being a parent. I don't have to fix dinner because I can bring it home with me. I don't have to get my car fixed because they'll do that for me at work. I don't have to do the laundry because they'll do that. They really care about me and want my off time to be meaningful. But if you go talk to organizations that aren't great cultures, and there are a number of really big tech brands headquartered in Silicon Valley who have really bad cultures,
True.
and we know who they are, and you talk to those employees, and they have the exact same set of perks, and you say to them, and I have, so what do the perks here really mean? Here's what they say. This company wants every ounce of blood in my body. They never want me to go home.
Exactly.
It's all the same. The difference is the relationship of trust
True.
between the leaders and the employees, and the expression, and that the perks are an expression of care as opposed to an expression of control and that kind of thing. And it's all the same
All
stuff.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So I think I'd like for us to kind of dive onto this whole conference and its topic really around HR tech. Analytics seems to be like a space where everybody is a shiny object that everybody seems to be attracted to. And when I look at engagement and engagement data, every organization has that because every HR head feels the pressure to measure engagement because everybody else is measuring engagement, right? And there's plethora of data that one has access to right now. It's comp data, absenteeism data, health data, insurance data, talent management related data. How do you make sense out of all of this to truly create meaningful workplaces? I mean, there's a sense of overwhelm, right? You can bring the best of analytics and tools inside, but how do you make sense out of that?
There are answers that are two sides of the coin. So let me start with the less data-driven. You drive culture from the top, and you drive culture by example.
Right.
Right? So leaders who are trustworthy, who are competent, who tell the truth, who are fair and honest, approachable, human, they connect, they look people in the eye. If they happen to be on the elevator that's full of employees, they don't pretend like there's nobody there. They engage, they talk, they might even know employees' names. That's simple, but it's hard if that doesn't come naturally to you, right? And in lots of C-suites, that doesn't come naturally. Right. If you were a baby boomer and you were raised in management that knowledge is power, and we operate on a need-to-know basis around here, and I'll tell you what you need to know, right?
Do as I say.
Yeah, that's how management worked when I joined the economy. So the simple part is behavioral. Are our values our values, or are they not? And are there consequences for not behaving in a values congruent way? And if your leaders are not held accountable to act congruently with the values of the organization, but everybody else is, you're sunk. No amount of data analytics are going to help you if the leaders are dishonest, right? So on the other side of the coin is all the data that we have, and how do we make sense of it? And I think this is a unique challenge, particularly for HR right now, because typically HR is not schooled in analytics. HR people typically are not data scientists, and so large companies have the luxury of having budgets and having understanding about the role that analytics can play. And many large companies around the world, in their HR department, they have data science.
People analytics function.
They have a people analytics function.
Or they partner with others who can bring that capability to them.
Right. I think the real challenge, so I think they're getting it right in many ways. I think the real challenge is for companies that have maybe 8,000, 7,500 employees
6,000 employees.
And lower, because they probably don't have the budget bandwidth to create a people analytics, function. The people in their functional organization probably aren't data scientists.
Right.
And so I think that's the land of opportunity for HR people who are early or mid in their career, is to go back to school and begin to get some of these analytical skills. Data scientists, no matter what the function, are some of the most sought after talent in the world,
now, exactly,
right?
exactly.
Whether it's marketing data analytics, or it's HR, or it's product, or it's, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think HR has been slow
In
to adapt,
moving
slow
to
and
this.
moving. And so if you want to be a hero in your HR career and in your HR organization,
Jump onto the analytics.
Jump onto the analytics, not because it's the shiny object, but because there's gold in them thar hills, as they
completely.
say. The data can inform decisions and direction for workforce planning and workforce strategy.
True.
In immensely powerful ways.
So that brings me to an interesting point, right, around leadership that you talked about. Now, very soon, in 2 or 3 years, you're going to have a situation where you're going to have 4 different generations in the workforce. Now, as a leader that has responsibility for 4 different generations of the workforce, the one school of thought obviously is that generations of people are different, thereby what appeals to them is different, and you need to customize and therefore be able to respond to them or talk to them in a language that resonates with them, and therefore the power of analytics or contextual analytics to be able to almost communicate one-on-one in a meaningful way. Is there something common in your mind, or is it really 4 different things? We need to have 4 different solutions, very unique to every individual. What's your point of view on this?
Yeah. So, quoting data sources is a lot like quoting the Bible. You can find a quote to support any position.
Any data.
Yeah, and so you can find a data point to support any position that you want. But my personal experience is that human beings are pretty much human beings. There are times in your life when you're married and you're starting a family and you just buy a house where the financial pressures in your early 30s are enormous and you might not be willing to take some risks. And compensation might be the most motivating thing, right? When you're just starting out and you're full of zeal and you're really clear what your purpose and your passion is, lots of times, unless you're overloaded with college debt, it's not so much about the money. It's about the purpose and the meaning and the passion. And as you get older and the financial stresses perhaps are a little bit less, you maybe feel like you can indulge, your purpose and your passion. So I'm not so sure that it's about millennials versus Gen X's versus baby boomers as it is a time in your life cycle. But I will say, from my time at Great Place to Work, when we look at the data everywhere in the world from truly great workplaces, there really are no statistical, except for one case, there are no statistical differences based on gender, based on age, based on function, based on industry, or based on geography. The one area where that's not the case, and it's just a tiny, tiny little statistical difference, is around the world, women are not so sure that they're being paid fairly.
Got it.
Right? We know that.
Yep.
And in many cases, they aren't, even in the greatest work cultures, in the world. Yep. But I find that not the common thought, right? When I was starting my career and entering the economy in the late 70s, if someone had said to me, China, do you want your work to have meaning? Do you want to bring purpose to your life through your work? I would have said probably, well, yeah, and what does that have to do with our job interview conversation, right? The difference between what was happening when baby boomers were entering the job market and millennials are entering the job market are largely societal differences, right?
Shifts that are happening.
Shifts that have happened. And millennials grew up in a very inclusive, diverse world with technology in their hands. Baby boomers didn't grow up with either of those.
Right.
And so they are asking for things that everybody wants, but they're the first generation
To have it all.
to actually have an understanding of it and to demand it.
Exactly.
And to expect that, well, of course my job is going to bring purpose and meaning to my life. I want my job to be all about my passion. And oh, by the way, I want to proceed fairly quickly in my career. I want to learn a lot. I want to be able to give back a lot. And I want to really make a difference. Well, I wanted all of those things too, but that wasn't part of the ecosystem. Even if I had thought those thoughts, which I'll be honest, I didn't, I probably wouldn't have said anything because that wasn't how it worked. You know, we came in, work hard, pay your dues, one step at a time, you'll be rewarded. And I did, and I was.
Yeah.
And as I got more competent and as I was able to make more and more contributions, the passion and the meaning and the purpose was there every single day. But I still, even when I was in my 30s and maybe even early 40s, I wouldn't have demanded it. And it was like the cherry on top of the sundae that I actually got it, because I knew a lot of people who didn't.
True. So I think, what I'm hearing you say is, yes, there are generations, people need different things, but it's a lot about point in time, the societal shifts that are happening, and where individuals are in their own life journeys. That truly defines what drivers are important to them, and therefore how engagement, what you need to do from an organizational culture standpoint to respond to that. The one that I'm seeing a lot of HR leads now grapple with is this whole concept of the gig economy, or what we call as portfolio careers, or what in Accenture we call as liquid workforce, where we believe that a good 30 to 40% of the workforce by 2020 in the US potentially would be liquid, right? Now, these are people who are working with you on almost on a crowd basis, right? On projects. They're not your employees. You don't want to go the full mile, because by going the full mile, you run the risk of being seen as an employer and therefore issues from a compliance standpoint. But if they're not your employees and you cannot go the full way, how do you really engage? How do you buy loyalty? It's genuinely a struggle, because there are no half measures when you think about engagement. What's your counsel for HR heads? How do you go about this?
So I think the fundamental for any culture is to create a human experience, that your employee experience recognizes that your stakeholders, whether they're full-time employees, whether they are, contractors, whether they are liquid and they come in and they come out, are treated like full-on human beings by their leaders, by their colleagues, and that the benefits and the culture strengths, whether it's benefits for full-time employees or culture strengths for folks who are not full-time employees, really we start with, we're all human beings, right? And the thing about human beings is, and again, based on different, not necessarily generation cohort, but time in your life, we have different stressors. So when you're starting out and you have mountains of college debt, there are some stressors there. When you're married or you're just starting to have a family, your kids get sick sometimes and you can't come to work. Or when you're my age and your parents are elderly and you're making decisions around care and home and domicile and those kinds of things. Well, I'll be honest, I've spent the last year working on a new life situation for my mother who couldn't live on her own anymore. I wasn't 100% present in my day-to-day work life. I wasn't as sharp because I was worried about my mom. And so if I was in a work environment at that point that really recognized sort of the humanity of my situation, and actually if my boss knew that this was what I was doing and might ask from time to time, so China, how's your mom doing? How's that process going? Or if you're a younger person with a sick child, so really, how's Ricky doing? Is he doing okay? What's the prognosis? What do you need? How can we help you? Or you're working with a younger employee who you happen to know their passion is building homes for the disadvantaged, and you know that, and you engage with them on that. You're building social relationship capital, and that's free. That's not regulated by any government in the world, as far as I can tell. And so, it's not necessarily human kindness, but it's the recognition that our colleagues aren't just skill sets that clock in at 8 and clock out at 6, but that they have full lives, and those full lives impact in a positive way and in a negative way sometimes their ability to be fully present, mindful, innovative, collaborative, smart, customer focused, and because they're human, we're okay with that.
Yeah. I think it's a great point you make, because I have, in the last 18, 24 months, started to see this big shift of mechanistic organizations, right? Talking about being more human, being uniquely human, mindfulness. And I experience that more on the Western world. For us on this side of the world, it's very natural. Through yoga and other things, we've always talked about being present in the moment and things like that. So I think very interesting points. But I think the point that I want to come to is showing up fully, right? Knowing very well that engagement is not about, oh, there's work and there is work and there is life. I mean, both transgress very well into each other, and it's about it's actually a life which is of balance, right? So I want to come to a very interesting point to you, saying how do you find balance with all your commitments, and you've had a very active professional life, and even now you keep rather busy. How do you find balance? What is balance for you?
I don't actually think of it as balance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think of my life, and I never have, as work and then something else, right? I think of life, and there are times when I am hyper-focused in my professional life and less focused on sort of personal things, and there are times when I'm hyper-focused on personal things and less focused on still meeting my commitments, but less hyper-focused on my professional life. And it ebbs and flows. It just absolutely ebbs and flows. But I don't try to balance it. I try to make it sort of work together. And one of the most important lessons that I learned, my husband and I never had children. That just didn't happen for us. And so he loves with a passion what he does, and I love with a passion what I do. And happily, even though we're in two extremely different businesses, we see lots of commonality in what we do, and are able to, with each other, sort of do the ebb and flow kind of thing. But I recognized early on as a leader that your employees look to you as the example. So, China, if you work 24 hours a day, if you're on 24 hours a day, if you're emailing at 2 in the morning, if you're, then you must expect that from us. So I learned early on to act in a way that I wanted my employees to feel comfortable acting, and I did not ever want my employees to feel the pressure of having to be always on.
Always.
And in this age of digitization and all, we were just laughing with your 2 cell phones, and I hadn't looked at my phone for 10 minutes. That's a really hard thing to do, and it's a really hard thing for leaders to model.
Right. The other thing I was fascinated with was your blog. So I'm not sure how many of you had a chance to look at the blog, but for those of you who are interested, ChinaGorman.com, and I think it's very interesting. I had a chance to look at least now a year of blog that you did. Very interesting research, very interesting offering to the HR community of various research and snippets. Tell me about why Tuesday, right? Why Tuesday data point? And second is what was your thinking behind coming up with this blog? I mean, what's the intention?
The name of the blog is Data Point Tuesday, and I blogged for about a year without that title, and I wasn't very persistent. And so I wanted to call it Data Point something, and I'll tell you why. But I made it Data Point Tuesday and not Monday, because if I didn't finish it up on Sunday, I'd still have Monday to post. But if it's called Data Point Tuesday, I have to post every Tuesday. And I needed that sort of discipline and I wanted to post once a week, and create an expectation that you'll come to my blog on Tuesday morning and there'll be something new. So why Data Point? My career has been leading organizations that serve organizations through the HR function, right? So all of my buyers, all of my partners were HR people. And then I ran the Society for Human Resource Management for several years with 265,000 members. So it was all about HR people every day. I have such affection for HR, their role in the organization, and their sometimes lack of budget and lack of staffing to be able to really take time for themselves to stay current, much less be ahead of the wave, right? So the mission of Data Point Tuesday is to find interesting research, analysis, survey results in reports, pick an interesting data point and serve it up. A lot of the data, sometimes it's academic research, but a lot of times it's vendor research, vendor white papers, because they write in a very consumable way. They have an obvious bias, and at the end of the white paper, they want you to go out and buy their whatever it is they do. Some of the data points that they serve up and some of the analysis and conclusions that they make are really interesting. And so I'm not ever saying, buy their stuff, but I am saying, well, here's an interesting take. Here's an interesting piece of data or series of data points that you might want to think about as you're putting your budget together next year, or you're thinking about making changes in your learning and development approach, or you're thinking about making changes in how you measure engagement or how often and those kinds of things. So it's kind of like my gift to HR.
Well, actually, it's a big gift, and I think I feel very privileged to have got exposed to it. Now that I've subscribed to it, I look forward to it. But I think I do suggest to all of you, do subscribe to it, ChinaGorman.com, as well as you can follow China on China Gorman at Twitter. That's her handle, and hear more from that. I want to go out to the audience and see if there's a question or so that we want to ask, and then we could then try and wrap in a bit. So any questions around engagement?
China, this question is to you. When she said that the employer is taking care of everything, starting from your laundry to, ensuring the car is washed. Is it only for the top level, or is it for every employee that is in your organization?
No, generally speaking, the days of the executive dining room
is long
gone. Companies like Google and Salesforce and little insurance company in Wisconsin called Acuity, and even the companies here in India and around the world. If you have a view that treating your employees like human beings, and you provide proof of that by nurturing them through food and exercise and time off and those kinds of things, you do it for everybody. A human being is a human being, and it wouldn't make sense, and it wouldn't be values congruent to just do it for the senior people and not for everybody else, right?
Great. So I think we're going to wrap this very quickly, China. Thank you very much. I think for me there are clearly a few takeaways. One takeaway is it's good to focus on engagement, but don't be blindsided just by the numbers that engagement throws up. Work on the culture of the organization, work on leadership and leadership behavior, because those are very fundamental things that will go rather long. The day of the mechanized organizations, especially with digital disruption, are numbered, and therefore the human-centered organization, the need to have meaningful conversations, the need to have genuine, nurturing conversations is what people will yearn for, and HR has a big role in facilitating some of that. And I think the big thing around data is about creating organizational capability to support looking at data and figuring out what data you need to look at, as well as work on to be able to support this whole engagement bit. And I like the one around balance, right? There is no work and there is life as two separate things to find a balance. And I like to call it fitness, right? You want to have work-life fitness. Yes. Both places need to be fit. You got to figure out how they need to fit, but you are fit as a person on both sides. So thank you very much for thank you very much for having this conversation. It was very engaging. A lot for us to ponder over. So thank you very much.